The two most dangerous giants in the Bible are, first and foremost, Og, king of Bashan, and Goliath. Og was a powerful and infamous Amorite king who reigned in Ashtaroth during the time of Moses. He fought against the Israelites as they journeyed to the Promised Land. God granted the Israelites victory over Og's forces, and Moses and the Israelites captured Bashan, a fertile land east of the Jordan River. Due to Og's terrifying strength and the relative inexperience of the Israelite forces, this victory was significant. Before the Israelites' encounter with Og, they fought another Amorite king, Sihon. Moses had asked Sihon to allow the Israelites to pass through his land, promising not to take any of the Amorites' resources. However, Sihon gathered his forces and attacked the Israelites instead. God helped Moses and the Israelites defeat the Amorites and take their land. In Numbers 21:33-35, we read, "Then they turned and went up by the way of Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against them, he and all his people, to the battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to Moses, 'Fear him not, for I have delivered him into thy hand, and all his people, and his land. And thou shalt do to him as thou didst unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt at Heshbon, so they smote him, and his sons, and all his people, until there was none left alive, and they possessed his land.'" Og's size and strength were legendary, making him a formidable enemy. However, God had already delivered Og and his domain into the hands of the Israelites. The outcome of the battle was predetermined before Og even donned his armor. According to Deuteronomy, Og ruled over 60 fortified cities, all of which were conquered by the Israelites. This victory provided Israel with more territory to occupy on the east side of the Jordan River and demonstrated that, through the power of God, they could overcome the mighty enemies they would face on the west side. In Deuteronomy 3:5, it is written, "So the Lord our God also delivered into our hands Og, king of Bashan, and all his army. We struck them down, leaving no survivors. At that time we took all his cities. There was not one of the 60 cities that we did not take from them, the whole region of Argob, Og's kingdom in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls and gates and bars, besides a great number of unwalled villages. The Israelites utterly destroyed these cities, as they did with Sihon, king of Heshbon, destroying every city, men, women, and children, but taking the cattle and spoils for themselves." Og's defeat highlighted the power of God, who delivered even the most strongly fortified cities into the hands of his people. This victory foreshadowed future triumphs, such as the one at Jericho, where God's power would again prove unbeatable. Og was also a giant, as evidenced by his iron bed, which measured 9 cubits in length and 4 cubits in width, approximately 13.5 feet long and 6 feet wide. This detail emphasizes Og's enormous size. A man requiring such a bed was likely 10 or 11 feet tall. After defeating Og, Israel took control of his extensive lands on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. Og was not a weak ruler, and his defeat showed that the Israelites had no reason to fear the size of their enemies. All that was required of them was to remember the power of their God. In Deuteronomy 3:11, it is noted, "For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants known as the Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the cubit of a man." Og's colossal bed had become famous and was undoubtedly kept as a memento. News of Israel's victory spread quickly, instilling fear in the hearts of those in Canaan. Rahab, a prostitute from Jericho, believed that the Lord had power even over that strongly fortified city because she and others had heard of the victories over Sihon and Og. In Joshua 2:10, we read, "For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed." Moses used this victory to encourage the Israelites as he handed leadership over to Joshua, on the verge of entering Canaan. In Deuteronomy 31:4 and Psalm 135:7-11, it is written, "Who makes vapors ascend from the ends of the earth, who makes lightning for the rain, who brings the wind out of his treasuries, who struck the firstborn of Egypt, both of man and beast, who sent signs and wonders into the midst of thee. O Egypt, upon Pharaoh and all his servants, who smote great nations and slew mighty kings, Sihon king of the Amorites, and Og king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan." And in Psalm 136:18-20, it continues, "And slew famous kings, for his mercy endures forever, Sihon king of the Amorites, for his mercy endures forever, and Og king of Bashan, for his mercy endures forever." According to Deuteronomy 3:11, Og was a descendant of the Rephaim, indicating a man of great stature or a giant. In Joshua 12:4, it is noted, "And the territory of Og, king of Bashan, who was of the remnant of the Rephaim, who dwelt at Ashtaroth and Edrei." Og is referred to as the last of the Rephaim in Deuteronomy 3:11 and later in the books of Numbers and Joshua. The term Rephaim is a Hebrew word for giants. The Rephaim were a people who lived in Canaan and other places during the time of Moses and Joshua. The term Rephaim is descriptive, not ethnic, meaning the terrifying ones. The Rephaim were giants accustomed to battle. When the Israelites first attempted to enter the Promised Land, the spies reported that it was inhabited by giants known as the Nephilim and the sons of Anak. The repeated references to the Rephaim in these early chapters demonstrate that Israel, trusting in God, was more than capable of defeating this fearsome race of warriors. It also shows that their fear of these men was unfounded. In Numbers 13, when they refused to enter the Promised Land, their excuses appear weaker in light of the victories of the following generation. Nothing is too difficult for God. Nothing is impossible for Him. In Matthew 19:26, it is written, "But Jesus looked at them and said, With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." The second dangerous giant in the Bible is Goliath. Goliath was a Philistine giant, an enemy of the Israelites, who were gathered for war. Not long before, the Philistines had been completely defeated, but now they were making a comeback. They entered Israeli territory and appeared to have taken possession of part of it, as they camped in an area controlled by Judah. In 1 Samuel 17:1-3, it is written, "Now the Philistines gathered their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoh, which belongs to Judah, and pitched between Shochoh and Azekah, in Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them." The valley of Elah was more like a large canyon than a small valley. In 1 Samuel 17:4, it is written, "And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span." We may not immediately understand what this means because we don't measure things by cubits or spans, but in modern terms, Goliath was about 9 feet 9 inches tall. If you add the length of his arms when he raised them over his head, you can imagine what an imposing figure he must have been. But it wasn't just his size that was intimidating. In 1 Samuel 17:5-6, it is written, "He had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs and a javelin of brass between his shoulders. The staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And one bearing a shield went before him." Goliath was dressed in what we would call chainmail, a massive piece that resembled canvas and was covered with overlapping bronze rings. This chainmail protected the wearer from the shoulders to the knees against the weapons used by opponents. This particular style and size of armor weighed 5,000 shekels of brass, which is equivalent to between 175 and 200 pounds in modern standards. Goliath was armed with a bronze helmet, bronze greaves to protect his shins, and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. All these elements were made of bronze. Only the head of his spear was made of iron, weighing 600 shekels, which is approximately 20 to 25 pounds according to the written account. He was accompanied by a shield bearer who walked in front of him. The Hebrew word used here refers to a larger shield used in battle, large enough to protect an adult. Its purpose was to shield his body from the arrows shot by the enemy. Take a moment and allow your mind to visualize the impressive scene you've just read. Imagine the terror you'd feel if you had to face a colossus of this size, protected by so much armor. Undoubtedly, the odds are against anyone brave enough to face him in battle. Notice what this giant warrior did in 1 Samuel 17:8-9. Goliath stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. Again, the Philistine challenged the battle lines of Israel that day, saying, Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, named Jesse, who had 8 sons. Jesse was old in the days of Saul, advanced among men. His 3 eldest sons had followed Saul to battle. The names of his 3 sons who went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, Abinadab the second, and Shammah the third. David was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul, but David returned from Saul to shepherd his father's flock at Bethlehem. The Philistine Goliath came out morning and evening and took his stand for 40 days. Goliath proposed a popular strategy in Eastern civilization's representative combat, or one-on-one conflict. He would represent the Philistine army, while the chosen one from Israel would represent the Israeli army. Whoever won, his army was victorious. Whoever lost, his entire army lost. Over the course of a month and a half, Goliath paraded there every morning and evening, boasting of his size and power, and challenging anyone to fight him. A young man named David was tending his father's flock of sheep in the small town of Bethlehem, located in the mountains of Judah. He was too young to join the army. In fact, David probably wasn't aware of the situation between the Israelites and the Philistines. He may not have even heard of Goliath. His only knowledge was that his 3 older brothers were serving in Saul's army. So Jesse called David to run an errand. In 1 Samuel 17:17-18, it is written, And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare. And take their pledge. David had no intention of fighting. His father had simply sent him to deliver some snacks to his brothers and show his care for them. The sun rose like any other morning for both David and Goliath. There was no warning, but in reality, Goliath's morning challenge would be his last, and David's heroic life would begin. David rose early the next day and did exactly what his father had advised. He left his flock of sheep with another shepherd, and as he approached the vicinity of the Israeli camp, he noticed the troops preparing for battle and heard the war cry. He simply wished to observe what was happening. David hurried to the front line and went in to greet his brothers, leaving the supplies in the care of the equipment keeper. While there with his 3 brothers, David heard a loud shout from across the valley, and then everyone in his immediate vicinity started running back and hiding inside their tents. All the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. 1 Samuel 17:24. Remember, David had never witnessed or heard the challenge of the giant of Gath. He saw a giant man covered in armor, shouting threats and challenges, and cursing the God of Israel while looking across the battlefield. This was the 40th day the Israelites faced Goliath, but it was the first time for David. In 1 Samuel 17:26-27, It is written, and David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. Saul had concocted a scheme to entice someone to kill the giant. The problem was, he was the only man in the camp of Israel who was capable of fighting Goliath. He was taller and more robust than all the others, and was the leader of the people. Saul devised a strategy to draw someone else into combat, promising the man who killed Goliath a great reward, including his daughter's hand in marriage and a tax exemption for his father's house. A bride, great wealth, and a tax-free life don't sound too bad, right? Yet, it was not enough to draw a volunteer. The people in David's immediate surroundings informed him about the incentive plan, which included a variety of external motivations. So here is David, dressed in his simplest shepherd's attire and armed only with his most basic shepherd's weapons, his sling and his staff, ready to fight. Then comes the turning point in 1 Samuel 17:41-46, and the Philistine moved forward, and came near unto David with his shield-bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a ruddy youth, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine also said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Imagine the possibilities. David stood undaunted before this massive creature. All David had was a sling and a stone against a giant wearing 200 pounds of armor. A stone hurled through the air was all it took. Goliath fell like a sack of stones. In 1 Samuel 17:47-51, it is written, And that all this assembly may know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead. And he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of the sheath, and slew him, cutting off his head. When the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. After this, the Philistines scattered when they realized their champion was dead. David brought the head of the Philistine to Jerusalem. As for Goliath's weapons, David had to use Goliath's own sword to kill him. The narrator mentions that the hero kept the weapon inside his tent, where it remained as a trophy. This crucial conflict between giants teaches us four things. First, facing giants is an intimidating experience. With the perfect perspective and a safe distance of thousands of years, we can look back at the boldness and victory of Moses and David. However, consider, even with the eyes of faith, what it would be like to face the intimidating presence of such a brute. David, however, asserted, "My God is greater than him." Second, you have to enter the fight. No one else can fight for you. Your OG is your OG, your giant is your giant, and your Goliath is your Goliath. Others may try to encourage you, but the battle is yours to fight. No one else, not even a counselor, pastor, father, or friend, can fight for you. Third, God provides a sense of security. Moses and the Israelites defeated their enemies with confidence in God, which served as a source of stability in their lives. When you spend a significant amount of time on your knees in prayer, it's surprising how stable you can become. However, if you try to defeat the giant alone, you will fail. Fourth, acquiring victories is an experience that will stay with you. We are expected to remember the successes we had in the past. We are expected to share our stories of lions and bears, as well as our personal victories against Goliath. Maybe you don't know what is on the other side of the valley. Maybe you have no idea what giant awaits, but it's there, lurking. That uncertainty alone is huge, but compared to the Lord God Himself, say with faith, "The battle is yours, Lord, it's your fight. I trust in you. I give all my weapons and abilities to you and present myself before you, trusting in you." If this content was valuable to you, I ask that you support me by subscribing so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Together, we can enlighten more minds and expand our understanding. Thank you for being here, and may God bless you.